Today, we're diving into one of the most influential business books of the 20th century, In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters and Robert Waterman. Let's set the stage. The year is the early 1980s. The American economy is under immense pressure. Competition is fierce. Japanese companies are dominating global markets with their efficiency, their quality, and their relentless improvement systems. At the time, many people believed America was losing its edge. Corporations were seen as too bureaucratic, too slow, too focused on numbers and not enough on people or innovation. It was during this turbulent period that Peters and Waterman set out on a bold mission to uncover what truly makes companies excellent. They studied over 40 top-performing organizations across different industries, eventually highlighting 43 companies that consistently outperformed their peers. Their goal was not just to identify successful companies, but to decode the principles, the habits, and the cultural DNA that made them thrive, and their conclusion was groundbreaking. True excellence is not simply about chasing profits or cutting costs. Excellence is about people. It's about culture, it's about values, it's about being close to the customer, empowering employees, and acting quickly in a world that rewards speed and adaptability. Excellence, they argued, is not a secret formula. It's a way of thinking, a way of behaving, a habit. And in this session, we'll walk through the 8 timeless principles they uncovered, principles that continue to inspire leaders, entrepreneurs, and organizations around the world, even 4 decades later. So let's begin. One of the first patterns Peters and Waterman noticed was this. Excellent companies don't get stuck in endless analysis. They don't let bureaucracy paralyze decision-making. Instead, they have a strong bias for action. Think about it. How many organizations do you know that spend weeks, months, even years in planning meetings, debating strategies, running more research, and waiting for perfect data, only to miss the opportunity? The excellent companies in this study had a different approach. They moved quickly, they experimented, they tested, and when things didn't work out, they adjusted. There's a famous phrase that captures this mindset. Ready, fire, aim. In other words, take action first, learn from the outcome, then adjust your aim. A great example comes from 3M, the American manufacturing giant. One of their scientists, Spencer Silver, was trying to create a super strong adhesive, but what he actually invented was a weak, reusable glue that didn't have an obvious application at first. Instead of throwing the idea away, 3M allowed experimentation. Another employee, Art Fry, used it to stick bookmarks in his hymn book without damaging the pages. And from that tiny experiment, the world-famous Post-it note was born. This product, now used in offices and homes everywhere, came not from a carefully designed corporate strategy, but from experimentation, acting quickly, testing, and learning. Now, let's contrast this with companies that overanalyze. Too often, organizations fall into what some call paralysis by analysis. They gather more reports, more data, more forecasts, and by the time they're ready to act, the opportunity has passed. The lesson here is clear. In today's fast-moving world, delay is defeat. Customers' needs change quickly, competitors innovate rapidly. Technology disrupts industries overnight. If you wait until you have perfect information, you've already lost. Excellence requires momentum. It requires courage to experiment. Not reckless risk-taking, but small, fast experiments that lead to learning and growth. So, as Peters and Waterman remind us, don't sit still. Don't let caution become a cage. Excellence begins with action. The first hallmark of excellent companies is a bias for action. Think about this. How many times have you seen organizations stuck in endless meetings, endless PowerPoint decks, endless spreadsheets, only to watch opportunities slip away? Peters and Waterman observed that the best companies don't wait for perfect information. They don't sit around polishing strategies until they're flawless. Instead, they move, they test, they learn, and they adapt quickly. In their words, these companies embrace the philosophy of ready, fire, aim. Not the other way around. Action first, perfection later. Let me give you a powerful example. 3M. One of the world's most innovative companies, 3M is responsible for products that we all take for granted today, like the Post-it note. But did you know that Post-it notes were born from what was essentially a failed experiment? Back in the 1970s, a scientist at 3M named Spencer Silver was trying to create a super strong adhesive. Instead, he ended up with the opposite, a weak, pressure-sensitive glue. At first, it seemed useless, but 3M had a culture of experimentation. They encouraged people to keep testing, to keep exploring. Another employee, Art Fry, came up with the idea of using the failed adhesive to create bookmarks that would stick without damaging pages. From that small experiment, the Post-it note was born, one of the most successful office products in history. This story illustrates a key truth. If you don't act, you don't discover. Innovation requires motion. Now, compare that with companies that get bogged down in endless analysis. We sometimes call this paralysis by analysis. These organizations move too slowly, waiting for certainty. But in a competitive world, hesitation is fatal. By the time they decide, more agile competitors have already seized the market. Another example, Amazon in its early years. Jeff Bezos famously said, "If you wait until you know everything, you've waited too long." Amazon launched products quickly, often imperfectly, and then refined them based on customer feedback. That's the essence of bias for action. The lesson is simple. In business, speed matters. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Of course, bias for action doesn't mean recklessness. It means thoughtful experimentation, small bets, quick tests, rapid learning. The companies Peters and Waterman studied weren't careless. They were intentional risk takers. So here's the takeaway. Don't overthink. Don't wait for the perfect plan. Start, act, learn, improve. Because in the race of business, the company that hesitates loses. Principle number 1. Bias for action. Excellence belongs to those who move. The second hallmark of excellence is being close to the customer. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But in reality, very few companies do it well. Many organizations say they care about customers, but their actions show otherwise. They chase short-term profits, cut corners, and treat customers as transactions rather than relationships. Peters and Waterman discovered that excellent companies go far beyond that. They put the customer at the very center of everything they do. They see customers not just as buyers, but as partners. One of the most famous examples of this principle comes from Johnson & Johnson during the Tylenol crisis of 1982. At the time, Tylenol was one of the best-selling pain relievers in the United States. But suddenly, tragedy struck. Several people died after taking Tylenol capsules that had been laced with cyanide by an unknown criminal. What did Johnson & Johnson do? Instead of denying responsibility or waiting for more information, they acted quickly. They pulled every single bottle of Tylenol off the shelves, tens of millions of dollars in lost sales. They didn't do this because it was easy or profitable. They did it because protecting customers mattered more than protecting short-term earnings. The result? Customers trusted them even more. Within a year, Tylenol regained its market share and became stronger than ever. Why? Because Johnson & Johnson proved, through action, that they put the customer first. This principle isn't only about dramatic crises. It's about daily behavior. Think about companies like Nordstrom, famous for its legendary customer service. There's an old story about a man who once returned a set of automobile tires to a Nordstrom store. Nordstrom doesn't even sell tires, but the employee refunded him anyway. The point wasn't about tires. The point was about trust, flexibility, and going the extra mile. Or look at Starbucks. They don't just sell coffee, they create a third-place experience between home and work. By listening to customers and making the coffee shop feel like a personal space, Starbucks built an emotional connection that keeps people coming back, cup after cup. What Peters and Waterman stress is that listening is everything. Companies that excel spend real time talking with customers, watching them use products, walking in their shoes. The phrase they use is close to the customer. Not just surveys or data, but genuine closeness. Contrast this with companies that ignore customer feedback. Blockbuster is a famous example. Customers wanted more convenience, no late fees, and access to movies at home. Netflix listened. Blockbuster didn't. And we all know how that story ended. So what's the takeaway here? It's this. Your customers are your best teachers. They'll tell you what's working. They'll show you where you're failing. And if you build a relationship of trust, they'll stay loyal, even in hard times. So remember, don't just sell to customers. Don't just serve them. Stand beside them. Principle number 2. Close to the customer. Excellence is built on trust. The third principle of excellence is autonomy and entrepreneurship. If Principle 1 was about speed of action and Principle 2 was about being close to the customer, then Principle 3 is about unleashing creativity inside the organization. Peters and Waterman noticed something striking. Excellent companies didn't just rely on top management for new ideas. Instead, they empowered people throughout the company at every level to think, act, and innovate. This runs against the grain of traditional management thinking. For much of the 20th century, companies were built like machines, strict hierarchies, rigid job descriptions, and layers of bureaucracy. The assumption was that innovation only came from the top, but the companies in search of excellence proved otherwise. They showed that if you give people freedom, they will surprise you with their creativity. Take Hewlett-Packard, for example. HP became legendary for its management philosophy known as the HP Way. This philosophy emphasized respect for individuals, open communication, and, most importantly, trust. Employees at HP were encouraged to experiment, to build new products, and to propose new solutions. It was this environment that produced breakthrough after breakthrough. Oscillators, calculators, printers, and eventually, technologies that powered the personal computer revolution. Another classic example is 3M. We already mentioned Post-it notes in Principle 1, but the backstory is worth repeating here. A scientist at 3M created a weak adhesive that initially seemed like a failure. Instead of shutting down the idea, 3M's culture allowed him to keep experimenting. Eventually, that failure became one of the most successful office products in history. Why? Because 3M gave its employees autonomy. They even had an official policy. Employees could spend 15% of their time on projects of their own choosing. That's autonomy and entrepreneurship in action. Google later copied this idea with its 20% time, which famously led to products like Gmail and Google News. The principle is timeless. When people are given space to explore, they innovate. Now let's consider the opposite. When companies smother employees with bureaucracy or punish them for taking risks, creativity dies. People become afraid of making mistakes, so they stop trying new things. And in a fast-changing world, that's a recipe for decline. Think about Kodak. They actually invented the digital camera in the 1970s, but the company's leadership refused to embrace it because they feared it would cannibalize their film business. They had the talent, they had the invention, but they didn't allow entrepreneurial thinking. The result? Kodak, once a giant, collapsed. The lesson is clear. Innovation isn't just about technology, it's about culture. Autonomy and entrepreneurship send a powerful message to employees. We trust you, we believe in your ideas, and we'll give you room to try. When people feel that trust, they take ownership. They act like entrepreneurs inside the company. They solve problems faster. They create new value, and they build the future. So what's the takeaway here? If you want innovation, don't control people, empower them. Principle number 3, autonomy and entrepreneurship. Freedom fuels creativity, and creativity drives excellence.
Principle number 4 is productivity through people. This principle may sound simple, but is revolutionary. The best companies know that their people are their greatest asset. Not machines, not systems, not even technology, but people. In the 1982nd, many managers thought the opposite. They believed success came from efficiency, automation, and cost-cutting. Employees were seen as replaceable parts like cogs in a machine. Peters and Waterman challenged that idea. They found that excellent companies didn't treat people like costs to be minimized. Instead, they treated them as partners in success. Let's look at Hewlett-Packard again. HP pioneered a practice called management by walking around. Instead of staying in corner offices, HP leaders walked the factory floors, talked with employees, and listened to their ideas. This created trust, loyalty, and a sense that everyone mattered. Disney did the same. Walt Disney himself was known for constantly walking around Disneyland, chatting with employees at every level, from ride operators to janitors. He understood that frontline employees shape the customer experience. They're the ones who bring the magic to life. When leaders stay close to their people, they build a culture of respect and accountability. Employees don't just work for a paycheck. They work because they feel valued. And when people feel valued, productivity skyrockets. Now, let's compare that with organizations that fail to value people. Think of companies where leadership is distant, communication is poor, and employees are treated as expendable. What happens? Morale collapses, turnover increases, productivity falls, and eventually customers notice the difference. Take Toyota as an example of the opposite success through people. Toyota empowered every worker on the assembly line to stop production if they spotted a problem that was unheard of in manufacturing. In most factories, stopping the line was a crime. At Toyota, it was encouraged. Why? Because leadership trusted their people. They believed every worker had insight and responsibility for quality. The result? Toyota became the gold standard in automotive excellence. This principle also connects to a simple truth. When employees thrive, companies thrive. Investing in training, encouraging personal growth, and giving people a sense of purpose pays off in innovation, loyalty, and performance. But productivity through people is not just about kindness. It's also strategic. Companies that unlock the full potential of their people gain an edge that competitors can't easily copy. Technology can be duplicated. Strategies can be imitated. But a strong, people-centered culture, that's unique. Think about Southwest Airlines. They consistently outperformed competitors, not because of fancy technology or superior planes, but because of their culture. They put people first, both employees and customers. Employees were empowered to be themselves, to have fun, to solve problems creatively. That culture created loyalty, productivity, and ultimately profitability. So, what's the lesson here? Productivity doesn't come from squeezing people harder. It comes from unlocking their potential. When leaders trust their employees, listen to them, and empower them, amazing things happen. People stop being resources and start being partners, and that's when productivity truly takes off. Principle number 4, productivity through people. Great companies aren't built by systems, they're built by people. Principle number 5 is hands-on, value-driven. This principle is about something deeper than profits or products. It's about values, what the company stands for, and how leaders live those values every single day. Many organizations like to hang posters on the wall, words like integrity, teamwork, excellence. But in excellent companies, values are not just decorations. They're guiding principles, visible in everyday decisions and behaviors. Let's look at Disney. Walt Disney was known for being deeply hands-on. When Disneyland first opened, he personally walked the park almost every day. He inspected the rides, tasted the food, and paid attention to tiny details like how clean the sidewalks were. Why? Because Walt believed the experience of families mattered most. Clean parks, friendly staff, magical details, those weren't slogans. They were values. Similarly, Johnson & Johnson became famous for putting customers' safety above profits. During the Tylenol poisoning crisis in 1982, the company made a bold decision. It pulled 31 million bottles of Tylenol off the shelves, costing them over $100 million. That action wasn't driven by short-term profit calculations. It was driven by their credo. Our first responsibility is to the patients, doctors, and nurses who use our products. Because they live their values, J&J didn't just recover, they strengthened trust for decades to come. Another example is Procter & Gamble. P&G leaders were known for being close to both products and customers. They didn't just look at spreadsheets. They spent time in households watching how people used soap, shampoo, and detergent. This hands-on approach ensured that their values serving families and improving daily life were never just words. Here's the key. Leaders in excellent companies don't manage from afar. They're visible. They set the tone. They roll up their sleeves. They don't just say quality matters. They show it. They don't just declare people come first, they act on it. Contrast this with companies where leaders talk about values but behave differently. Imagine a CEO who preaches teamwork but rewards only individual achievement. Or a leader who claims to care about customers but never spends time listening to them. Employees quickly see the hypocrisy. Customers sense it too. Over time, the culture erodes, trust vanishes, and performance declines. In fact, Peters and Waterman argued that values are not soft. They are the strongest drivers of behavior. When people know the values and see leaders embody them, decision-making becomes clearer. Employees don't need endless rules or manuals. They just act according to the shared values. Let's take an example from Southwest Airlines again. Their value was clear: make flying fun, friendly, and affordable. Leaders didn't just write it down, they lived it. Executives would serve snacks on planes, help with baggage, and joke with passengers. Their behavior reinforced the culture, and employees followed suit. So, what's the big lesson here? Excellence is not just about strategy or structure. It's about a living culture shaped by values. And values are made real when leaders are hands-on, visible, engaged, consistent. Peters and Waterman put it simply, culture eats strategy for breakfast. A brilliant strategy will fail in a toxic culture, but even an average strategy can succeed in a strong, value-driven culture. So, remember this. Leaders don't just talk values, they live them. They lead by example. They show up. They pay attention to details. They put values above convenience or short-term profits. And in doing so, they create organizations that last. Principle number 5, hands-on, value-driven. Culture is not a side project. It is the beating heart of excellence. Principle number 6 is stick to the knitting. What does that mean? Simply put, do what you do best. Don't get distracted. Master your craft and stay true to your core business. Tom Peters and Robert Waterman observed that excellent companies resisted the temptation to wander into businesses they didn't understand. They didn't chase every new trend. Instead, they doubled down on what they were already great at. Take McDonald's, for example. McDonald's didn't become the global giant it is by suddenly deciding to sell clothes, electronics, or luxury goods. They stuck to hamburgers, fries, and milkshakes. But within that focus, they obsessed over consistency, speed, and quality. Whether you walked into a McDonald's in New York, Tokyo, or Paris, the taste and service were the same. Their excellence wasn't about doing everything. It was about doing one thing exceptionally well. Contrast this with companies that lose their way. In the 1982nd, many conglomerates tried to diversify into dozens of unrelated industries: real estate, oil, entertainment, banking, all under one corporate umbrella. On paper, it looked like growth. In reality, most of those ventures failed because the companies strayed too far from what they truly understood. A powerful example of success in sticking to the knitting comes from Boeing. For decades, Boeing's focus was simple: build the best airplanes in the world. They poured energy into engineering, safety, and innovation in aerospace. That focus made them a leader in commercial aviation and space exploration. Or look at Coca-Cola. At its core, Coca-Cola is a beverage company. Yes, they have explored different drink categories, juices, teas, bottled water, but they never forgot their identity, refreshing the world with beverages. They didn't suddenly decide to build cars or computers. That clarity of purpose gave them resilience for more than a century. Here's the danger. When leaders see a profitable new industry, the temptation is strong to jump in. But excellence isn't about chasing shiny objects, it's about discipline. Peters and Waterman warned, when companies step too far away from knitting their core capabilities, they often stumble. Think of it like a craftsman. A master woodworker becomes great by refining skills over decades. If one day that woodworker decides to become a glassmaker without training or passion, what happens? Mediocrity. The same is true for companies. Now, stick to the knitting doesn't mean never evolve. It doesn't mean stay frozen in time. Companies must innovate. They must adapt. But innovation should happen within the core strengths. McDonald's added salads, McFlurries, and coffee drinks, but they did it within the framework of fast, affordable food. Apple added the iPhone, but at its heart, Apple was still about technology design and user experience. The principle is this: growth is strongest when it grows out of your roots. If you know your customers, your strengths, and your craft, then you have a foundation for long-term success. So the key lesson here is, don't spread yourself thin. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Find your knitting the thing you do best, and stick to it with discipline, mastery, and pride. As Peters and Waterman put it, the odds for excellent performance seem strongly to favor those companies that stay reasonably close to the businesses they know best. Excellence comes not from chasing every opportunity, but from staying true to your identity. Principle number 6. Stick to the knitting. Do fewer things better. Mastery beats distraction. Principle number 7 is simple form lean staff. What does that mean? It means that the best companies avoid unnecessary complexity. Their structures are simple, their staff lean, and their focus clear. In business, complexity is seductive. Leaders often think that as companies grow, they must add more layers of management, more processes, more committees, more reports. But here's the truth: bureaucracy kills. It slows decision making, discourages initiative, and smothers innovation. Peters and Waterman discovered that excellent companies embraced the opposite. They kept their organizations flat and nimble. They avoided heavy, centralized control. Instead of armies of middle managers, they relied on small teams, empowered individuals, and streamlined processes. Think about a startup. In its early days, a startup moves fast. Decisions are made quickly. Everyone knows the mission. There's no time for endless meetings or thick policy manuals. That agility is why small companies can disrupt giants. But the danger is that as companies grow, they often lose that simplicity. They pile on procedures, they add layers of approval, and soon, instead of moving forward, they are bogged down in red tape.
Consider 3M, the company famous for Post-it notes and countless other innovations. Part of their success comes from keeping teams small and flexible.
Instead of building massive, centralized bureaucracies, they encourage scientists and engineers to work in compact, autonomous groups. That lean structure allows creativity to flourish.
Or look at Southwest Airlines. Unlike many traditional carriers, Southwest avoided complicated hub and spoke systems, assigned seating, and overly complex fare structures.
Their model was lean, one aircraft type, quick turnaround, simple pricing. That simplicity wasn't just efficiency, it became a competitive advantage that kept costs down and customers loyal. On the other hand, companies that allow bureaucracy to balloon often collapse under their own weight.
Think of large corporations with endless approvals, where a simple decision takes weeks, and employees feel powerless. Those organizations lose the speed and spirit that once made them great.
The principle is clear. Keep it simple. Build organizations that are light, agile, and focused on action. Complexity may feel like control, but in reality, it slows progress. Now, simplicity doesn't mean chaos. It doesn't mean no rules, no structure, or no accountability. It means clarity. Everyone knows their role, their responsibilities, and the company's mission.
The structure is there to support people, not to suffocate them.
Imagine two teams. Team A has 10 layers of hierarchy, endless paperwork, and constant approval chains. Team B has a lean structure, clear goals, and empowered members. Which team moves faster? Which team feels more motivated? The answer is obvious. So, what can leaders do? They can cut unnecessary steps, flatten hierarchies, remove processes that don't add value, and most importantly, they can trust their people to act. As Peters and Waterman emphasized, excellent companies are not those with the most sophisticated charts and procedures. They are those with the simplest forms and leanest staff, because simplicity fuels speed, creativity, and impact. The key lesson here: simplicity scales, complexity kills. As organizations grow, the challenge isn't to add more rules, it's to protect simplicity. That's where excellence lives. Principle number 7: simple form, lean staff. Keep it light, keep it clear, keep it simple. And now we arrive at the final principle: loose, tight properties. At first, this phrase might sound confusing. How can something be both loose and tight at the same time? But that paradox is the key to understanding excellence. Peters and Waterman found that outstanding companies strike a delicate balance. They are loose in the way they allow creativity, freedom, and flexibility, but they are tight when it comes to core values, culture, and purpose.
Let's break that down.
On the loose side, excellent companies give employees freedom to experiment, innovate, and explore. They don't micromanage every action. They trust their people to find new ways of solving problems.
That looseness allows ideas to flow and creativity to thrive.
But here's the danger. If everything is loose, an organization drifts. Without shared principles, it can easily lose focus. That's why the tight side is equally essential.
Excellent companies hold firm on their core values. They are uncompromising about what truly matters: the customer, quality, integrity, service.
Think of it like this: a jazz band. Each musician has freedom to improvise, that's the loose part. But they are all playing within the same song, the same rhythm, the same key, that's the tight part.
The combination creates harmony.
A real-world example, Johnson & Johnson. Their credo, putting patients and customers first, is non-negotiable. It guides every decision.
But within that framework, teams are free to innovate, explore new products, and test new approaches. That balance of freedom and discipline is what has allowed J&J to thrive for decades.
Or consider IBM. For decades, IBM was known for both innovation and consistency. Their research teams were encouraged to explore cutting-edge technologies, but the company never wavered on its commitment to reliability and service. That combination of flexibility in methods and strictness in values was central to their reputation.
When organizations lose this balance, problems arise. Too tight, and the company becomes rigid, bureaucratic, and resistant to change. Too loose, and it loses coherence, purpose, and identity. Excellence lives in the middle ground.
The lesson for leaders is clear. Be flexible in how people achieve goals, but be unwavering in what the company stands for.
Give teams autonomy, but anchor them in a strong culture. Encourage experimentation, but make sure values never get compromised.
Because at the end of the day, values are the compass. Freedom is the fuel. Together, they create momentum without losing direction. So, here it is, principle number 8, lose tight properties.
Flexibility in action, discipline in values. That is the balance of excellence.
And so, after exploring 8 timeless principles, we come to the end of our journey through In Search of Excellence.
Let's pause for a moment and reflect.
Back in the 1982nd, Peters and Waterman were asking a simple but profound question.
Why do some companies thrive while others struggle? Their answer wasn't a magic formula. It wasn't about the latest technology or the perfect strategy or cutting-edge financial engineering. Instead, it was about something deeper: habits, values, and people. The 8 principles we've just explored are as relevant today as they were 4 decades ago. Let's briefly recap them together.
1. Bias for action. Don't overanalyze. Act, experiment, learn, adjust. 2. Close to the customer. Put the customer at the center. Listen, adapt, and build trust. And 3. Autonomy and entrepreneurship. Encourage freedom, creativity, and ownership. 4. Productivity through people. Value and empower your people. They are the true source of success. 5. Hands-on, value-driven. Live your values. Leadership by example, not just words. 6. Stick to the knitting. Focus on your core strengths. Master your craft. 7. Simple form, lean staff. Keep organizations flat, flexible, and agile. 8. Lose tight properties. Balance freedom with discipline. Be loose in methods, but tight in values.
Taken together, these principles form a blueprint for excellence, not just for corporations, but for leaders, teams, and even individuals.
Because here's the truth: excellence is not about perfection. None of the companies in the book stayed excellent forever, Markets changed. Leaders came and went. Some stumbled.
But the principles they embodied, those remain timeless. Excellence is not a one-time achievement. It's a way of thinking, a way of working, a set of habits practiced every single day. So, what can we take with us from this journey? That speed matters more than hesitation. That customers are partners, not transactions. That freedom fuels innovation. That people, not machines, drive real productivity. That culture is the ultimate competitive advantage. That focus beats distraction. That simplicity beats bureaucracy. And that balance between freedom and discipline is the true art of leadership. If you are a leader, the challenge is clear. How will you apply these principles in your company, your team, or your career? And if you are an individual, the challenge is the same. How will you embody excellence in your daily work, your relationships, and your growth? Remember, excellence is not luck. It's not a secret, it's a habit. As Tom Peters famously said, excellent firms don't believe in excellence, only in constant improvement and constant change. So, let us all leave here with one commitment: to take action, to value people, to live our values, and to never stop striving for better. Because in the end, excellence is not a destination, it's a way of life. Thank you for joining me on this journey through In Search of Excellence. Until next time, go build excellence wherever you are.